Don't let me leave, Murph. Don't let me leave, Murph. No! 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 No!
Welcome back to the Dynasty Daddy YouTube channel. This week we are going to be taking our medicine and looking over some mistakes I made and some lessons I learned throughout the 2024 season and how that can help us going into 2025. So let's jump on in. Before we get to all the good stuff, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, all of that stuff. It really helps the channel grow and try to reach that 1,000 number mark. That's a goal of mine I have for this year. Lesson number 1 is don't write off players with high draft capital off of 1 year, mainly their rookie year. I think the perfect example and what you'll see on a lot of these videos is JSN went through the ringer on the fantasy football streets. Everyone was saying everyone that had his rookie year could not produce and be a relevant fantasy wide receiver. Clearly this year, he proved us all wrong. He had 203 fantasy points, 137 targets, 100 receptions, over 1,000 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. After putting up those amazing numbers, JSN currently sits number 26 on KTC, and there was many opportunities that we could buy this dip. I think the big takeaway we can see here is anyone that has that first-round draft capital, especially kind of that mid-ish range, what I would say is like 24 or earlier, we need to be patient with them, especially when you can explain the situation. JSN joined the Seahawks. The Seahawks already had DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. That offense already kind of had some chemistry. So he was coming in as the third wheel there, had to work his way into that offense. NFL teams don't care about our fantasy lineups, and they're not going to really take extra consideration to make sure our rookies are hitting certain thresholds that the fantasy community wants to see. Another thing to consider here is Pete Carroll left and the new coaching staff took over, and that's something that can shake up usage as well. So I think JSN had a phenomenal year. I completely agree that his value should go up as much, and we should not count out players just because their rookie season was a little underwhelming. Based on that use case, where should we look going forward? I think we have 2 really good examples. The first one is Odunze. I mean, he's basically copy and paste JSN situation. Come in behind Keenan Allen and DJ Moore in the offense. Third wheel, high draft capital. He's top 10 draft capital on Odunze. They're going to be patient with him. We should also be patient with him. Last year, he scored 117 fantasy points, 101 targets, 54 receptions, 734 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. A thing to consider is both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen had about 140 targets. 100 targets is pretty good in that offense. I expect that to continue to improve in 2025. I'm not scared of Rome as a fantasy football player going forward. I'm going to be patient. And if we look at his value, multiple dips, and currently sitting at a 90-day low on KTC, he's a great potential offseason buy for any owner that does get scared that Rome might not live up to his potential. Another great example is Marvin Harrison Jr. I made a previous video about Marvin Harrison Jr., so if you want to check that out, I'll link it somewhere around here. But Marvin Harrison Jr. put up a pretty solid year by all accounts. 165 fantasy points, 116 targets, 62 receptions, 885 receiving yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns. Obviously, the hype for him coming in was massive. So unless if he didn't have a Malik Neighbors year, he's probably not living up to the hype, and that's what happened. Should you be concerned? Maybe a little, but the only concern I would have is he's not coming in as the third wheel. He's kind of coming in as the second wheel and didn't really outperform expectation, even though his season he had was pretty serviceable. Lesson 2 is injury and drama panic. This is something I hear every time whenever I'm listening to a sports podcast or mainly a dynasty-focused podcast. Player X gets injured, and everyone's like, get rid of him on every roster. Get rid of Puka Nacua. Get rid of Rashee Rice. Get rid of all these players. To me, that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. When a player gets injured, you need to look at it on a case-by-case basis, and especially if a player has insulation. By the time everyone knows they're injured, like, you're already selling at the absolute low. The only time I want to sell on an injury is when it's a player that I'm completely out on and I never want to roster again. Someone like Nick Chubb when he got injured. Already older and his injury was going to take a year and a half or so to recover. It's just not, the value is just not there for me to hold. Let me get off for anything. I'm going to go through a few examples of players this year that I thought were perfect examples of why we should not sell right when a player gets injured. And then also kind of look at, based on that information, who should we target? So first up, I have Rashee Rice. He's the poster child. He's the thumbnail. But Rashee Rice, obviously the situation in the offseason hurt his value tremendously. He was a great buy coming into the season because, I mean, we've seen worse things happen and players still somehow end up on the field. You know, I'm not the morality police here, but if I'm trying to win a fantasy football league, he was a great buy. Then he comes in, starts crushing it, gets injured, but his value is literally still higher than it was this offseason. So what that tells me is he's young, he's tied to Mahomes, was producing elite before he got injured. People will still believe in it. And the second the injury happened, and you can see it based on this chart, the second the injury happened, his value is basically just flatlined. So if you sell the second he's injured, you're just accepting the lowest he's going to be because nothing's going to change till the end of the year. I mean, until he comes back. His value is going to be that value or better. There's no reason for me to panic on an asset like this, a young, elite upside wide receiver tied to Mahomes. Next, we have Anthony Richardson, a slightly different situation. And I do want to clarify, obviously, if you're holding Anthony Richardson into the offseason and his value starts going down, that's when you should have probably got off the train. But we saw him get benched and then him come back. And we see when he got benched, his value plummeted. But the second he came back, his value is back to where it was. These are the types of things to me where it's like, I'm not going to panic sell when he gets benched. Like I have been holding him for weeks and weeks and weeks as his value keeps going down. Why would I sell him right now when the floor falls out and I can get, pennies on the dollar? It's like, might as well just say I made my bed with this player. I need to ride it out. And now if you did, now you can sell him for at least what his value was pre-benching because he still has that fantasy rushing upside. He still has some upside. He's like 22. I mean, let's be patient. It takes time. I mean, Josh Allen's first 2 years were awful. I know that's the example everyone uses. Still, we need to be patient. I'm not saying he's a player I want to hold long-term, but I do think panic selling young players that have some interest around the league right when the bad news hits is a terrible move. The last example I want from this year is your boy, Puka Nacua, the BYU legend. I didn't get it. I mean, basically the best rookie season for a wide receiver ever. And then he has knee issues like week 2. And everyone's like, oh, like you should probably move him. He's not. Again, just be patient. Like, I don't care about if I lose a week 5 or week 6 fantasy football game. Puka Nacua has a crazy usage that's borderline unsustainable, but his usage is insane. We should be patient and trust that when he comes back, he's going to be the same player. Puka didn't even suffer a severe injury. He didn't tear his ACL or anything, and people were still out on him. Be patient. An injury just means I have to hold the bag or choose to completely get out. And if I'm not completely out on the player, I'm going to hold him at least for a little bit because as time goes on, he'll come back and at least be on the field or at least almost play, right? A great time to sell is 3 days before he starts if you don't believe in him because then at least his value is somewhat recovered and people are expecting some sort of production. Okay, so based on all of that, what should we be doing? What should we be thinking going forward? And the one name that really jumps out to me is potentially the biggest offseason buy is, I know you don't want to hear it, Christian McCaffrey. Why is that? He's injured. He's older. That's the concerns, right? But Christian McCaffrey as current value, to me, seems like a screaming buy because there's very few running backs that have the upside of Christian McCaffrey that you can get for that value, right? I mean, he's basically in that Derrick Henry value, which sounds crazy because Derrick Henry's healthy and all of that, but Derrick Henry's also 31, going to be 32, I believe. So there's some concerns there, but I do think Christian McCaffrey is a pretty solid buy right now. And if you look at when his injuries happened, his value just plummeted, right? I mean, and it's a little bit different because we had no idea really what was going on. In the beginning, it was like, oh, his knee hurts. Okay, whatever. We can be patient. and then became the Achilles tendonitis, so his value really kind of hit a low. And then he came back and played, and then his value went up. Surprise, surprise. And then now he popped. It was like a PCL, I believe, and his value plummeted. But you can still see his value starting to recover. As we progress through the offseason, I totally expect McCaffrey's value to recover to much higher than this, probably around the 5,000-ish range on keep trade cut. This is a perfect example of, am I committed to Christian McCaffrey long term? If I am, I'm obviously need to hold or buy. But if I'm not, I still shouldn't sell the immediate moment the bad news happens. The only times I would really want to sell a player that's injured is if I really need some sort of production now. Ultimately, I think just accruing value is the name of the game. There's very few times where a player past their rookie season gains significant value. And one of the few situations where you can buy low and actually get value on that trade is through an injury. Lesson 3 is panic production and lack of depth. Something I wanted to try this year was to really slim down my depth and try to fly kind of by, start those random gross guys every once in a while and hope that you can hit on them. And that's something I'm probably going to adjust a little bit this year. Just based on injuries, I do want to have a little bit of like a start to sit decision from week to week basis, just because I think it can get me into trouble. So I have some good examples and some bad examples. But here's one example I have where I traded 2 second-round picks for Deontay Johnson. I lost Rashee Rice. I needed someone to plug in. And unfortunately, Deontay Johnson gave me like one good week on Carolina and then got cut or traded. Didn't break the back of my team, but giving up 2 seconds for a player that I don't even know is going to be anywhere next year isn't that exciting. So this is a tough trade to swallow. Next one, I'm kind of meh on it. I was about to make the playoffs. And it's in a 0.5 or half PPR 0.5 tight end premium. To me, I'm like, Jonnu Smith's been crushing it. I can trade a second, just pick up Jonnu, give me some depth. And Jonnu, again, in the playoffs was very productive, so I don't hate this deal for me. I don't know how Jonnu will be long-term. He does have an extra year in Miami, so hoping that pans out. So I'm kind of 50-50, but this is kind of the trade of get me some production for a second. I can't really complain. Another example I have here is Rashad White for a second. This is probably my favorite trade of the bunch. I had a team I did not know if it would be good or bad. I just was like, let's see how it goes. And I was about borderline, like 6-7 seed towards the end of the year. And my running backs were Chuba and Singletary. That was it. And I was kind of just flying by the seat of my pants there. But the rest of my team was performing much better. So for me, I was like, let me just trade a second, pick up Rashad White, who has a favorable playoff schedule and is rather cheap, and give me some more depth there, especially since Tyrone Tracy started taking over for Singletary. And I was able to, win a little bit of money in that league. I didn't win the whole league, but I got my buy-in back. So I can't really complain. A small deal like that, where you're patient and not panicking, because I could have panicked that all I had was Singletary and Chuba. To me, it's about being patient, finding teams where it makes sense, instead of trying to force it through like that Deontay Johnson trade. Lesson 4. Listen to NFL teams, especially with the draft. Something that I got caught up in is all the rookie talk that you're going to hear here and elsewhere. And people told me Bo Nix sucks. Michael Penix will never see the field. But if a team takes a quarterback in the first round, especially in the top 16, they deserve to be a first-round pick in every single Superflex draft. That's just bar none. And I need to take the boring pick more often. This year it didn't bite me in the butt too much, but take the boring pick more often, because hitting on a Bo Nix in with the 110 and 111 this year is huge. You get a huge value bump. So that's something I need to not let the community sentiment kind of fog the brains when it comes to quarterbacks. Because if anyone, if anyone else that I listen to or y'all watch knew what quarterbacks would be good or bad, we would not be making YouTube videos. It's one of the hardest positions to scout. And ultimately, you just need dart throws on high-end quarterbacks that have the security of a first-round pick that the team has invested in them. Lesson 5, stacking late firsts and not fading late first in terms of value is something that I want to adjust. A lot of times when I have a late first, I just say, okay, get out of it. Don't want it. Let me see if I can trade it for someone else. Late first, when they do hit, are incredible. And I think being able to stack multiple late firsts, especially in deeper leagues, like a start 11, a start 12 league, those will really turn a team around really fast. And that's something the Rashee White team that I had from lesson 3 in that trade. I had 4 first-round picks. One was a high first-round pick, so I got lucky with a Malik Neighbors. Later on, Brock Bowers fell to me, so I took Brock Bowers with the 108, and I was able to clean up with the 110 and the 111 Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr. Got lucky later on with a Michael Penix in the second round, but having a lot of those late first, early second picks can really turn the team around. And something with deeper leagues, like this is a start 11. I think it might be a start 12. Deeper leagues, this is the way to go because you can turn your team around like that. And very few other trades can do that. So that's something I want to really invest in more, is figuring out, based on my league format, should I be hoarding these late first or should I not be? Those are 5 big lessons I took away from the 2024 season. Comment below if you agree with them or if you have any other lessons that you took away from the 2024 season. I'm excited to get into offseason and rookie hype. That's always a fun time, but it is important not to get overhyped by it all. Before you go, please make sure to support the channel, like, subscribe, all that stuff, as well as check out my Patreon if you want additional features on dynastydaddy.com, as well as support me and get early access to these videos. You usually get a 3 to 5 day early access to these videos, so definitely check that out if that's interesting to you, and I'll see y'all next week.